My family disowned me for choosing art over law. Now they want back in after I built a multi-million-dollar design company. Hey Reddit, I need some perspective on a situation that's been eating at me. Sorry for the long post, but there's a lot to unpack here. I'm Adam, 29 years old, and I run a successful digital design agency that I built from scratch. But 8 years ago, my family completely cut me off because I refused to follow their predetermined path for my life. Now they're suddenly interested in reconnecting, and I'm pretty sure I know why. Let me give you some background. I come from what most people would call a prestigious family. My father Jonathan is a federal judge. My mother Patricia is a corporate attorney at one of the biggest law firms in the state. My older sister Victoria is a prosecutor, and my younger brother Daniel just finished his residency to become a surgeon. Then there's me, the black sheep who wanted to be an artist. From as early as I can remember, it was just assumed I'd become a lawyer like my parents. Family dinners were filled with discussions about cases, legal precedents, and which law schools had the best programs. When I was 12 and told them I loved drawing and wanted to study art, my father literally laughed and said that wasn't a real career. My mother would throw away my sketchbooks if she found them, saying I needed to focus on serious subjects that would actually matter for my future. Throughout high school, they enrolled me in debate club, mock trial, and every academic program they thought would look good on a pre-law application. Meanwhile, I was secretly taking art classes online and practicing digital design whenever I could. I got pretty good at hiding it, but my heart was never in any of the legal stuff they pushed on me. When it came time for college applications, the fights really started. They had already decided I would attend their alma mater and major in political science as preparation for law school. I had been accepted there, but I had also secretly applied to several art schools and gotten into a really competitive digital media program at a school about 4 hours away. When I told them I wanted to pursue that instead, all hell broke loose. My father gave me an ultimatum. Either I would follow their plan, attend their chosen university, and eventually go to law school, or I could consider myself no longer part of the family. My mother backed him up completely, saying they had invested too much in my future to watch me throw it away on something as frivolous as art. Victoria called me selfish and immature, while Daniel just stayed quiet but clearly sided with our parents. I was 18 and terrified, but I knew if I didn't stand up for myself then, I never would. I chose the art school. True to their word, my parents cut me off completely. They stopped paying for anything, blocked my phone number, and told extended family that I had made my choice and was no longer welcome at family gatherings. It was brutal, but I was determined to prove them wrong. College was rough financially. I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay tuition and lived in the cheapest housing I could find. But I loved what I was studying. I threw myself into learning everything about digital design, user experience, branding, and web development. My professors noticed my dedication, and I started getting small freelance projects even as a sophomore. By my junior year, I had built up a decent client base doing logos and websites for local businesses. I was making enough to not only support myself but to start saving money. After graduation, instead of looking for a job, I decided to go all in on freelancing. I moved to a bigger city where there were more opportunities and started actively pursuing larger clients. The first few years were a grind. I worked 80-hour weeks, slept on a friend's couch for months to save money, and lived on ramen noodles. But slowly, the business grew. I started landing contracts with mid-size companies, then bigger corporations. I hired my first employee after 3 years, then expanded to a team of 5, then 10. Fast forward to today, and I run a company called Elevate Design Studio with 32 employees. We specialize in complete brand overhauls for major corporations, and our client list includes several Fortune 500 companies. Last year, we cleared 8 figures in revenue, and personally, I'm doing better than I ever imagined possible. I own a beautiful house in the hills, drive cars I used to only dream about, and most importantly, I wake up every day excited about my work. Throughout all of this success, my family maintained their silence. Not a word of congratulations when I got featured in business magazines, nothing when I won industry awards, complete radio silence when I got married to my amazing wife Alicia 2 years ago. They had made their position clear, and I had accepted that they would never be part of my life. But then, 3 weeks ago, something changed. My assistant told me that a Patricia Hamilton had called the office asking to speak with me. I initially didn't make the connection because I had been going by my wife's last name professionally for the past year. When I realized it was my mother, I was honestly shocked. After 8 years of nothing, she wanted to talk. I decided to take the call, mostly out of curiosity. The conversation was awkward and stilted. She asked about my business, how I was doing, mentioned that she had seen some articles about my company online. She said the family had been thinking about me and wondered if we could meet for coffee to catch up. No apology for disowning me, no acknowledgement of the years of silence. Just a casual suggestion to meet up like nothing had happened. I told her I would think about it and get back to her. Since then, I've received calls from Victoria and Daniel as well. Victoria was particularly interesting because she tried the guilt approach, saying that our parents were getting older and that family was important. Daniel was more direct, saying he had always admired my success and wanted to rebuild our relationship. Here's where it gets interesting. I have a friend named Ryan who grew up in the same social circles as my family and still keeps in touch with people from that world. I asked him to do some digging to see if he could figure out why my family suddenly wanted to reconnect after 8 years of treating me like I was dead. What he found out was illuminating. Apparently, my father has been having some financial troubles. Not poverty-level problems, but significant enough that their lifestyle has taken a hit. He made some bad investments a few years ago, and my mother's law firm has been struggling since several partners left to start their own practice. They've had to sell their vacation home and downsize their primary residence. Meanwhile, Victoria is going through an expensive divorce from her husband Thomas, who was also a lawyer. They're fighting over assets, and legal fees are piling up. Daniel is doing fine financially, but he's been complaining to people about his student loan debt from medical school. Then there's the social aspect. Apparently, at some recent family gathering, someone mentioned seeing articles about my company and asked how proud they must be of my success. Instead of being able to brag about their son, the successful entrepreneur, they had to awkwardly explain that we weren't currently in contact. In their social circle, having a child who's made it big but won't talk to you reflects poorly on your parenting. Ryan also mentioned that my Aunt Rebecca, who is my father's sister and someone I was always close to growing up, has been asking questions about why I never come to family events anymore. Apparently, she's been putting pressure on my parents to reach out to me, especially after she saw my wedding photos that Alicia posted online. So here I am, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me is curious about reconnecting. Despite everything, these are the people who raised me, and there are good memories mixed in with all the bad ones. My wife Alicia thinks I should at least hear them out, though she's also protective of the life we've built together. But I'm also angry. They didn't reach out when I was struggling to make it through college. They weren't there for any of the milestones that mattered to me. They only want back in now that I've proven them wrong in the most dramatic way possible, and I suspect their motivations aren't entirely pure. I'm supposed to call my mother back tomorrow with my decision about meeting for coffee. What would you do in my situation? Should I give them a chance to explain themselves and potentially rebuild these relationships? Or should I tell them that they made their choice 8 years ago and stick with the family I've chosen for myself? Thanks for reading this novel. Any advice would be appreciated. Date 1. Well, that escalated quickly. Thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. The response was overwhelming, and reading all your perspectives really helped me think through this situation. I decided to meet with my mother for coffee, but I wanted to control the situation, so I chose a place near my office where I'd feel comfortable. The meeting was yesterday, and it was every bit as awkward as I expected. Patricia showed up looking nervous, which was strange because I've never seen my mother appear anything other than completely composed. She's always been this intimidating figure of authority, but she seemed smaller somehow, less sure of herself. The conversation started with small talk about the weather and the coffee shop, but eventually, she asked about my business. I could tell she had done her research because she mentioned specific projects and clients that had been covered in industry publications. She seemed genuinely impressed, though it was clear she still didn't really understand what I do. Then she started talking about the family. She mentioned that Victoria's divorce was getting messy and that Daniel was working incredibly long hours at the hospital. She talked about how my father's blood pressure had been acting up and how they weren't getting any younger. It all felt like setup for something bigger. Finally, she got to the point. She said that the family had made mistakes in how they handled my decision to pursue art, and that they now realized they had been too harsh. She said they were proud of what I had accomplished and wanted to be part of my life again. She mentioned that they would love to meet Alicia and hoped we could all spend time together. I asked her directly if this sudden change of heart had anything to do with my financial success. She seemed taken aback by the question and insisted that money had nothing to do with it. She claimed they had been thinking about reaching out for years but weren't sure how I would react. That's when I decided to test her sincerity. I told her that Alicia and I had been talking about starting a family foundation to support young artists who come from families that don't understand their passion. I mentioned that we were planning to donate a significant portion of our wealth to causes we believe in over the next few years. The change in her expression was subtle but unmistakable. For just a moment, she looked worried, almost panicked. She quickly recovered and said that sounded wonderful, but I could tell the idea of me giving away money bothered her. I left the meeting feeling more confused than before. There seemed to be genuine emotion from her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there were ulterior motives at play. When I got home and told Alicia about the conversation, she was more direct than I expected. She said that if my family truly wanted to reconcile, they would start with an apology and an acknowledgement of the pain they caused, not with small talk and attempts to insert themselves back into my life. That evening, I got a call from Daniel. He was more straightforward than our mother had been. He said that the family had been wrong to cut me off and that he regretted not standing up for me at the time. He acknowledged that their timing might seem suspicious given my success, but he insisted that his desire to reconnect was genuine. I appreciated his honesty, and we talked for about an hour. It was the longest conversation I'd had with any family member in 8 years. He told me about his work at the hospital, his struggles with debt, and how he had always wondered what would have happened if he had been brave enough to pursue something different like I did. Near the end of the call, he asked if I would consider coming to Sunday dinner at our parents' house this weekend. He said Victoria would be there with her kids, and they all wanted to see me. I told him I needed to think about it. I'm still on the fence about the dinner invitation. Part of me wants to see if they can actually acknowledge what they did wrong, but another part of me thinks I'm setting myself up for disappointment or manipulation. Update 2. I decided to go to the Sunday dinner, but I set some ground rules first. I told Daniel that I would come, but Alicia wouldn't be joining me for this first meeting. I also made it clear that if anyone tried to pressure me about money or made Alicia feel unwelcome in future interactions, I would leave immediately and we would be done for good. The dinner was surreal. Walking into my childhood home after 8 years felt like stepping back in time, but also like visiting a museum of my past life. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, though I noticed they had definitely scaled back on some of the expensive decorations and artwork that used to fill the house. Victoria was there with her 2 kids, Mia and Timmy, who are now 8 and 6. They're adorable, and it was strange to think I had niece and nephew I'd never met. Victoria looked tired and stressed, which made sense given what she's going through with her divorce. She was polite but kept her distance initially. My father Jonathan was the most awkward part of the evening. He's always been this larger-than-life figure of authority, but he seemed almost sheepish around me. He asked about my business, but in a way that felt like he was trying to prove he understood it, even though it was clear he didn't. The elephant in the room was obvious to everyone, but nobody wanted to address it directly. We made small talk about the food, the kids, current events, anything except the 8-year gap in our relationships. Finally, about halfway through dinner, I decided to address it head-on. I said that while I appreciated being invited, I needed to understand why they wanted to reconnect now after so many years of silence. I said I wasn't interested in pretending the past didn't happen. That's when things got emotional. My mother started crying, which I had literally never seen before in my entire life. She said that they had been wrong to give me an ultimatum and that they had regretted it almost immediately. She claimed they had wanted to reach out many times but were too proud and didn't know how. My father was more direct. He said that he had been raised to believe that there was only one path to success and security, and that he was genuinely terrified I would end up struggling financially as an artist. He said that watching my success from afar had been both a source of pride and shame. Pride because I was his son, and shame because he had been so wrong about my potential. Victoria chimed in and said that she had always admired my courage to stand up to the family, even though she had been too scared to support me at the time. She said that going through her divorce had made her realize how important family support is during difficult times. It was a lot to process, and I'll admit I got emotional too. These are people I loved deeply for the first 18 years of my life, and hearing them acknowledge their mistakes was something I had wanted for a long time. But then the conversation took a turn that confirmed some of my suspicions. My father started talking about family legacy and how important it was to stick together, especially as they got older. He mentioned that they had been thinking about estate planning and wanted to make sure I was included in their considerations. I told them I appreciated that, but I had no interest in their money. I said that Alicia and I were doing well financially and that we were more interested in building relationships than inheritances. That's when Victoria made a comment that really bothered me. She said that it would be selfish of me to turn away from family money that could benefit my future children, and that I should think about the bigger picture. I realized at that moment that while their emotions might be genuine, there was definitely a financial motivation underlying this reconciliation. They wanted to rebuild relationships, but they also wanted to ensure that I would be willing to help them if needed, and that I wouldn't reject any inheritance they might want to leave me. I left that dinner feeling conflicted. I could see that they did regret how things ended, and part of me wanted to rebuild these relationships. But I also felt manipulated by the financial undertones of the conversation. Update 3. Things have gotten more complicated since my last update. After the Sunday dinner, I started getting regular calls and texts from various family members. Victoria has been sending me pictures of her kids and inviting Alicia and me to various events. Daniel has been trying to arrange guys' nights and weekend activities. My parents have been more cautious but have extended several dinner invitations. At first, I thought maybe I had been too cynical about their motivations. The attention felt genuine, and I started to think that maybe we could actually rebuild these relationships. Alicia was cautiously optimistic but advised me to take things slow and watch for red flags. Then, last week, things got weird. Victoria called me with what she said was a personal question. She asked if I would be willing to look at some business proposals her divorce attorney had put together. Apparently, part of her divorce settlement involves dividing up some business investments she and her ex-husband had made, and she wanted a successful entrepreneur's perspective on their value. I agreed to look at the documents, thinking it would be a way to help my sister during a difficult time. When I reviewed them, it became clear that she was in much worse financial shape than she had let on. The investments were mostly worthless, and she was going to be left with significant debt after the divorce. A few days later, Daniel called with his own request. He said he was considering starting a medical consulting practice on the side to help with his student loans, and wondered if I could give him advice about starting a business. During our conversation, he mentioned that he was really struggling with debt and had been looking into personal loans to consolidate everything. Then yesterday, my father called with a big ask. He said that he and my mother had been talking about downsizing even further and possibly moving to a smaller city where the cost of living was lower. He mentioned that this would be a difficult transition and wondered if I might be willing to help them with some of the expenses associated with moving and getting settled. That's when I realized what was really happening. This reconciliation wasn't just about rebuilding relationships or estate planning. My family was in serious financial trouble, and they saw me as a potential solution to their problems. I talked to Alicia about it, and she was furious. She said that while she had been willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, this pattern of behavior was manipulative and unacceptable. She pointed out that none of them had asked about my life, my interests, or my goals beyond my business. Every conversation eventually circled back to money or financial advice. I decided to test my theory. I called Daniel back and told him that Alicia and I had been talking about our financial priorities, and that we had decided to focus our resources on starting our own family and supporting causes we believe in. I mentioned that we were planning to live more modestly going forward and wouldn't be in a position to help family members with loans or investments. His response was telling. He immediately became less enthusiastic about our recent conversations and said he understood, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. When I suggested we still get together for that guy's night he had mentioned, he suddenly had scheduling conflicts. I had similar conversations with Victoria and my parents, and the pattern was consistent. Once I made it clear that I wasn't going to be their financial backup plan, their enthusiasm for rebuilding our relationship diminished significantly. The final straw came 2 days ago. I received a call from a financial advisor named Robert Ken who said he was working with the Hamilton family on some estate planning issues. He said that my parents had asked him to reach out to discuss some investment opportunities that might benefit the whole family. When I told him I wasn't interested and asked how he had gotten my number, he seemed confused and said that my father had assured him I was eager to be involved in the family's financial planning. That evening, I called my father and confronted him about giving my contact information to a financial advisor without my permission. He tried to play it off as a miscommunication, but I could tell he was embarrassed about being caught. I told him that I was disappointed that their attempts at reconciliation seemed to be primarily motivated by financial considerations. I said that if they were genuinely interested in rebuilding relationships, they needed to do it without any financial expectations or agendas. His response was defensive. He said that family members are supposed to help each other and that my attitude was selfish and ungrateful. He said that they had raised me and supported me for 18 years, and that I owed them consideration now that I was successful. I told him that the support they gave me came with conditions and ultimatums, and that when I didn't meet their expectations, they cut me off completely. I said that I didn't owe them anything beyond basic human decency. The call ended badly, with both of us saying things we probably shouldn't have. Since then, the regular contact from family members has stopped almost entirely. Alicia thinks I handled it correctly and that I've discovered their true motivations before getting too invested in rebuilding these relationships. But I'll admit, I'm sad about how things turned out. Part of me had hoped that we could actually become a family again. Update 4, Final. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and I wanted to give everyone a final resolution to this situation. A lot has happened, and I think I finally have clarity on where I stand with my biological family. After that confrontational phone call with my father, I didn't hear from anyone for about 2 weeks. I thought maybe that was the end of it, but then I got a call from my Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister who I mentioned earlier. Rebecca asked if we could meet in person because she had some things to tell me about the family situation that I needed to know. I agreed, and we met at a restaurant halfway between our cities. What she told me was eye-opening. Apparently, the family's financial problems are much worse than I realized. My father didn't just make bad investments. He made some decisions that were potentially career-damaging. There have been questions about some of his judicial rulings that may have been influenced by personal financial interests. While nothing has been proven, there are investigations happening that could end his career and result in serious legal consequences. My mother's law firm isn't just struggling, it's essentially defunct. 3 of the 5 partners left to start their own practice and took most of the major clients with them. She's been working as essentially a solo practitioner for the past year, taking on smaller cases that barely cover her overhead costs. Victoria's divorce is even messier than I knew. Her ex-husband is alleging that she hid assets during their marriage, and there are potential criminal charges being discussed. She's facing not just financial ruin but possible jail time. Rebecca told me that the family had been discussing how to approach me for months before my mother made that first phone call. They had hired a private investigator to research my business and personal life, which is how they learned about Alicia and got detailed information about my financial success. The reconciliation attempt was carefully orchestrated. They had planned to slowly rebuild the relationship, get me emotionally invested in being part of the family again, and then gradually start asking for financial help. When that didn't work, they moved to the more direct approach of having the financial advisor contact me. Rebecca said she was telling me this because she felt guilty about not reaching out to me herself over the years, and because she didn't want to see them manipulate me during their time of desperation. She also told me something that really affected me. Apparently, over the years, there had been multiple occasions where family members had wanted to contact me. When I graduated college, when I started my business, when I got married, various relatives had asked my parents for my contact information because they wanted to congratulate me or invite me to events. My parents had consistently told everyone that I was the one who didn't want contact, that I had made it clear I wanted nothing to do with the family. They had been actively preventing any reconciliation efforts from other family members while making me look like the one who was holding grudges. After meeting with Rebecca, I felt angry, sad, and strangely relieved all at the same time. Angry because of the deception and manipulation, sad because it confirmed that their recent interest in me was primarily financial, but relieved because I finally had the full truth and could make decisions based on reality rather than hope. I decided to write letters to each of my immediate family members. In the letters, I acknowledged that I understood they were going through difficult times, but I explained that I couldn't have a relationship with people who saw me primarily as a financial resource rather than as a person. I told them that if they ever wanted to rebuild our relationships based on genuine care and interest in each other's lives, without any financial expectations or agendas, I would be open to that conversation. But until then, I needed them to respect my boundaries and stop contacting me. I also made it clear that any future attempts to reach me through business associates, financial advisors, or other third parties would result in me involving lawyers and potentially pursuing restraining orders. The responses to my letters were revealing. Victoria wrote back with a long, emotional letter that was part apology and part justification for their behavior. She acknowledged that they had handled things poorly but said that families should stick together during hard times regardless of past mistakes. Daniel's response was shorter and seemed more genuine. He apologized for the financial requests and said he understood why I felt manipulated. He asked if we could try to build a relationship without any money involved, and said he would respect whatever decision I made. My parents' response came through their attorney, which told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed our relationship. The letter essentially said that they were disappointed in my selfishness and that they would not be contacting me again. Since then, I've had 2 follow-up conversations with Daniel, and I think there might be potential for a genuine relationship there eventually. He seems to understand that trust needs to be rebuilt slowly and without expectations. As for the others, I haven't heard anything since those initial responses, which is probably for the best. Alicia and I have talked extensively about all of this, and we've both learned some valuable lessons about family, boundaries, and the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who value us for who we are rather than what we can provide. We've also decided to move forward with our plans for the foundation I mentioned earlier. We're calling it the Creative Independence Foundation, and it will provide financial support and mentorship for young artists whose families don't support their creative pursuits. It feels like a positive way to channel this experience into something that can help others. Looking back on this whole situation, I'm grateful that it happened, even though it was painful. It confirmed that the life Alicia and I have built together, surrounded by friends who genuinely care about us, is more valuable than any biological family relationship based on obligation or financial motivation. To those who followed this story and offered advice, thank you for your perspectives. Many of you warned me about the financial motivations from the beginning, and you were absolutely right. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see what we don't want to acknowledge ourselves. For anyone going through similar family situations, my advice is to trust your instincts, set clear boundaries, and don't let guilt or hope blind you to people's true motivations. Family should be about love and support, not transactions and expectations. I'm closing this chapter of my life and focusing on the future Alicia and I are building together. Sometimes the family you choose really is more important than the family you're born into. Thanks again, Reddit. You helped me navigate one of the most difficult situations of my life, and I'm grateful for this community.